Starting live video. Hello, welcome to Burn the Wagon series, where I'm going to be having a mild high school teacher on, Yolanda Reza. I believe she should be joining me shortly. And I'm going to say a little bit, couple words about her when she comes on. So yeah, so I'll wait for her to join me. Let's see. Hopefully she should be. There we go. Approve.
Can you see me?
Yeah. We got it.
Yay!
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, the student becomes the teacher, right?
I was just saying right before you came on that you were my high school teacher, and you were. I didn't say it yet, but I wanted to tell you that you were the first person to start like my opening of my eyes to say there was a world outside of the reservation. So this is an honor for me to have you on and come and teach me again once again in my life. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. You know, you were one of those students that just changed my life and really guided my teaching afterwards. So I think we'll get into that once we start, right? Or
Yeah,
start
definitely.
early. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So first, I gave you a little introduction. You're my teacher back in the day in high school, so I want to just give you a little introduction for yourself. So this is Yolanda Reza, and then is that how you say your last name?
Reza, yeah, that's my name.
Reza. Okay. I knew it. I was like, I probably even say it. I'm butchering it. Okay. Cool. Okay. So yeah, I'll let you go ahead and give your introduction.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was looking at the clock. It's like, oh, it's not 7 now, but so my name is Yolanda Vasquez Reza. Reza is my married name. Vasquez is my career name. I started off with Vasquez as the last name I would use in all of my teaching credentials and all of my college degrees, and it's kind of a pain to change your last name and all of those things. So I kept my maiden name for my career, and Reza is my legal married name. So that, I hope, clears up some confusion. So I think I'll start with my background. I am the proud daughter of immigrants. So my family is originally from Mexico. Both of my parents are from Guadalajara, so it's a state in Jalisco, the Jalisco state. And my parents immigrated when they were very young. And so I know that I have privilege because they moved over here, because the only difference between me and some of the immigrants that we're seeing locked up in those cages is the fact that I was born here. And that's the only difference, right? So I know that brings me privilege, and I think we'll talk about privilege in a few minutes too. But knowing that sacrifice and seeing the sacrifice that my parents made really instilled in me the desire to do more, to be more, to give back. So from a very early age, I've sort of been like fighting the system, fighting the patriarchy, before I knew that there was a word to describe it. So for example, like the Mexican culture can be very sexist, and there's a lot of patriarchy involved. So I remember debating with my parents over whether or not I should be the one washing dishes or my brothers, right? But it started off that way. And so when I went into high school is where I really found my social justice spirit. There was a lot of social injustice happening. There was a lot of restlessness. There was Prop 187, which you're too young to remember. But I was out in the streets protesting and marching and everything else. Of course, I can't do that anymore because I have a special needs child. But it really set the stage for what I wanted to do. So then when I went into college, I went to USC. I was told not to go to USC because people like me don't go to USC. You know, I'm a person of color, low socioeconomic status. My parents didn't have the money. So that made me angry because that message was coming from somebody in a place of authority. You know, it was a counselor for middle school.
Wow.
So that anger kind of drove it, you know, and I know that sometimes we associate anger with like negative stuff, but you can really channel your anger into something positive that helps you drive and move forward, right? So out of anger and wanting to prove somebody wrong, I applied to USD, got in, and my major was public policy and management. I wanted to go into government to create change, to make change. And when I got to government, I realized that I didn't really care for it because there was really no immediate change that I could see. Like, I wanted to change the system. I wanted to help people, but government works so slowly, right?
Yeah.
It's it kills your soul sometimes, I'm sure. So I was like, well, what should I do now? And then I thought about those moments that brought me joy, and helping other people, teaching brought me joy. So I went back to school to get my master's and my teaching credential. And I went to Pacific Oaks College for that. And it's a small college in Pasadena. But one of the reasons that I really felt called to that college is because it's very progressive. And in the classroom, the students were both students and teachers. Whereas in other universities, it was very like one-sided. I'm the teacher, you listen to me, doesn't matter what kind of experiences you bring into this university.
Oh, we kind of cut out.
Can you see me?
We cut out. Yeah, we cut out for a second.
Sorry, I hope it wasn't my internet because it's been faulty. So I was saying that Pacific Oaks College was great because it was very progressive and it took into account the students' lived experience, but also it was founded on the principle of social justice, right? So when I graduated from Pacific Oaks and I had my credential in hand, I moved up to this little town called Point Arena. That's where my story begins, where you and I crossed paths. So there I go, up to Point Arena. I don't have any family up there. I'm driving up by myself, right? And I'm ready to take on the world. So I came in with a special education credential, and I was given my list of students that had an IEP. An IEP is, you know, the legal document that says a student needs different accommodations. And I was like, cool, let's do it. And I found that I was really successful with students, and so did other teachers, and so did the principal. So they started sending students to my classroom who needed additional supports. And that part was very rewarding because I got to work with students of all walks of life. And that was one of my favorite parts because as small as Point Arena was, there was diversity there, you know? I was coming from the inner city where the students were mostly Latino, you know? It was very homogeneous, but Point Arena was surprisingly very diverse, you know? I had never worked with students that were Native American, so that was, you know, that was new.
Yeah, I remember that. That was, I think, my junior year when I first started taking your class. And at that point in time, I never wanted to go to class. I never wanted to be in school. And you made me want to learn. Like, seeing you as a woman of color, and like, for me, women are always like, I learn from them better for some reason. And you're a woman of color, and you had this background that you told me about from, like you said, the inner city of Los Angeles, and I just, you know, connected with that. And we need more people teaching people like us those exact things. We need more connections like that in our schooling system.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that I studied when I was looking to get my teaching credential was we did pedagogy for a long time, just looking at different pedagogy. And so pedagogy is like the approach to teaching. And so this is when I started looking at the different educators that had really stressed the importance of education. So like one of my favorite, and then maybe I'll give you the information later on if you wanted to link it up to the recording.
Yeah.
Paulo Freire, he was an educator out of Brazil. And so for him, he believed that the classroom was a place where the social change could take place because he believed that everyone should have an active role in their own learning, right? And so instead of being like a passive recipient, like you're just sitting there taking in the knowledge, you're an active participant in what you're learning. And that's what I really wanted my students to get from being in my classroom, that it wasn't me just standing up there and lecturing. It was both of us learning and both of us trying to figure out whatever it was that we were working on. You know, I tried to make it so you guys never felt like I'm up there demanding. You know, it was more of an invitation to learn.
You're cutting out a little bit. You just cut out.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
What was the last thing you heard? Can you hear me now?
All right, I think we got you going again.
How about now?
You're still a little bit choppy.
Let me see.
If you maybe do you have good cell phone service? Maybe you can use your just Wi-Fi or your cell phone.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna try to do. Hold on for a second.
Okay. Cool. I think we're good for now. You seem to be
moving.
Yeah, you seem to be good.
Okay. Sorry, we've been having Wi-Fi issues.
Oh, that's fine. And then, okay, we were on talking about being up in Point Arena. And also, one question I wanted to ask you, what was one, like, couple major culture shocks when you got there?
Major culture shock.
Because, like, moving from a place from Los Angeles to Point Arena where there's, like, 2 roads.
In different places, too, right? The biggest culture shock was that everybody knew my business. Like, you know, without me sharing anything.
Yeah, that was one interesting thing I always thought, like, you moving to that city must have been so weird because it's like that everyone's gossip is literally everywhere.
Right. And then another culture shock was some of the teachers and some of the, you know, the locals would make fun of me because I would lock my car doors. I would like lock my front door. Like everything had to be locked. And that's because I was coming from the inner city where like crime is rampant and cars are broken into. So like I would get made fun of for locking everything. But, you know, that's that was what I was used to.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we're talking about education and stuff, I kind of wanted to ask you questions about like how it is being a woman of color coming up in like the education system and trying to make your way.
Well, it certainly has highlighted for me the need to have more representation in the teaching career, in the teaching environment, because when you go into the classroom and you see somebody that looks like you and has the same experiences as you, you're more likely to feel safe. And if you feel safe, then that's the point where you really start learning. And I was watching the podcast that you had with Norma. She was saying something about how when she needed a therapist, she wanted somebody that already knew, like she didn't have to explain all of the cultural traumas and everything involved. And that's pretty much the same for education. You won't learn until you feel safe. And you're going to feel safe if somebody has the same experiences as you, where you don't have to sit there and teach them about you and teach them about your cultural baggage, you know,
Trauma.
the trauma, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that must have been super hard. And like you said, going to USC, when you got there, was there any of that tension that you had to deal with, like the racial issues, like the person said, or was it not really a thing back like then in
Oh
LA?
my gosh, no, it was completely racist. And I didn't know at the time that there were terms for it, but there was a lot of microaggressions. There was a lot of situations where I would be asked multiple times if I was a student, because I was a person of color. And even with other students, like I remember I was a freshman. Freshman is the first year in college, and I was in the elevator with two white boys, and they're looking at me, and then one of them says, "What are you?" And I said, "I'm sorry," because it didn't register, right? I'm coming from this community that looks just like me, and I've never really encountered racism like in my face, right? So
Yeah.
he says, "What are you?" And I'm thinking, "What?" So I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "Yeah, what are you? What's your race?" And I said, "I'm Latina. My parents are from Mexico." And he says, "Oh, because you look white." And I think maybe my hair was like I had a different color and I was wearing contacts because that was the thing back then. And I just looked at him and I didn't say anything, right? Because I'm in shock. And then he says, "That's supposed to be a compliment." And that one blew me away. And I was so angry, but I didn't have the words to respond to it. And it bothers me to this day that I didn't have the voice, that I didn't have the words to respond to that.
Yeah, because like you said, you're just so caught off guard. You just like, who asked that question just like randomly in an elevator to just a stranger?
Mm-hmm.
And
And the dropout
yeah,
rate, I'm sorry, Juan, the dropout rate for the Latino community at USC was very high too. It was like over 50%. And I have to believe that part of that was because the support system that was lacking. Many of us were first generation college students, so my parents didn't know what I needed. They didn't know how to support. I had to find out things on my own, and a lot of it was trial and error. So one of the things
yeah,
that I really encourage my students to do is to look for all of the supports that are in place for them. Things have changed. Thankfully, there's more supports, there's more awareness of cultural needs, but that wasn't, my experience.
yeah. That's kind of a question I was gonna ask again too. Is were there other like Latinos at the college that you like groups of Latinos that came together or like stuff like that at that time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you know how you look for your tribe, right? You look for people
Yeah,
with the same
yeah.
experience. So I looked for the Latinos on campus, and I did join some leadership groups. And one in particular was called Chicanos for Progressive Education. And the motto was to encourage students to go on to, college, go on to a higher education. And so we would go and visit high schools that were predominantly Latino and share with them our experience and try to educate them on best practices to apply for what colleges, financial aid. I mean, it's a whole thing, right? That we don't know about because it hasn't been taught directly to us, where other communities just have that sort of embedded into their culture. So we did that because we knew that the lack of opportunity, the lack of awareness is what prevents many of us from moving on into higher education. It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of any other kind of cognitive skill. Like we have a lot of smart people that are people of color.
Yeah.
They just don't have the opportunity to be different or explore other areas. So, giving them an opportunity is sometimes instrumental in changing someone's life, you know?
Yeah, and that kind of goes into like one of these questions I was going to ask, because you said you're a special education major, right?
Yes, that's
Um,
my best.
yeah, background. Yeah, yeah. So we were talking the other day about like people people of color kind of being put into a special education category when it's just their learning is a little bit different.
Mm.
So I kind of want you to speak on those, and then we'll go into your special education, the group that you have. I can't remember what it's called. I have it here in my notes, but yeah, I'll let you go.
So we were talking about over identification, right, of special education needs like learning disabilities for students of color. And so it's such a big issue that the state of California actually requires the different schools to file reports as far as who the students are with IEPs and what race they are. Because a lot of students that have been diagnosed with emotional disturbance happen to be Black. A lot of kiddos that have been diagnosed with autism happen to be white. So there's a lot of cultural like tags attached to these things, right? And so when I was in the classroom, I noticed that most of the kids who were considered difficult or challenging were students of color. And so when they came into my classroom, my first priority was to make them feel safe. This is a safe environment for you to learn. And sometimes we didn't get to the academics because it wasn't as important. If you've just had a really horrible morning and you're a victim of domestic violence and you've seen XYZ, you're not going to be able to learn, like you're not emotionally able to learn, right? So I was able to like pick up those cues for my students, and eventually they trusted me and told me some of the stuff that was happening. And I would let them know like, hey, as long as you come to class, you know, we'll figure out something. I will help you with whatever, even if it's just you to sit there and chill. Like, I'm not going to be on you to do like an English assignment or math assignment when you're figuring out like where your next meal is going to come from. You know what I mean?
And AJ just commented from Point Arena, he trusted you always. So
hi, AJ.
we got another student giving you praise. So yeah, we all loved you back in Point Arena for sure.
AJ made like coffee mochas. He knew how to make my favorite drink when you know the student run coffee cart.
Oh, yep, I remember that. I do remember that. So yeah, so now I want to kind of shift into your work with the special education stuff and stuff like that, because I really want to learn about these things. You know what I mean? Because like a whole lot of other things in Point Arena, like people thought it was okay to like make fun of people like that and make, you know, it wasn't like it just they didn't treat people like people in Point Arena when it comes to things like this. And I didn't do the best in learning. So I'm in doing these things, I'm trying to do my best and learn from other people as well. So definitely teach me as much as you can today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the platform, Juan. In talking about special education, I always like to stress that everyone learns differently. And so, yes, we do have a special education law that dictates, you know, 13 categories. One of them is autism. That's, you know, kind of my thing right now because of my son. But if you learn differently, it doesn't mean that you can't learn. It just means that the teacher has to figure out a different way to present the information. So the special education piece, that's my credential. That's the entirety of my learning. But I found like in Point Arena, all of my toolkit, for lack of a better word, of everything that I learned in special education was applicable to all of the students that I was working with. So in special education, I learned how to change the assignment so that it was easier for the students to learn, but not change like the goal, the learning goal. You know what I mean? Like, for example, you and I were talking about that talk assignment. You came to the
Yeah.
classroom, you had an English assignment with a song that probably didn't speak to you, but we found a song from Tupac. And I shared with you how much I appreciated his music. To me, my soul. My colleague, Dr. Sa, she is also a special ed amazing guru and a woman of color.
Awesome.
So she's part of my tribe.
Thank you for joining us today.
So when we were working on the assignment one, we still met the goal of the assignment, which was to dissect a song, to figure out what the meaning of it was, right? We just used a different song. And sometimes it's that simple, using something different, using something from the students' lived experience to connect to the educational goal, because we don't live in a vacuum. Like, we all bring our different experiences into the classroom. And like the first 2 weeks of school, all I wanted to do was learn about the students. Like, you want to know about like all of my stuff, right? I want to know about you, what makes you you. And some kiddos, like some students, were surprised and didn't really know what to share. And that was sad for me because it's like they hadn't been asked previously.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's one of your strategies. And I think the video that you have is knowing the community that the student's from.
Yes. So when I was interviewing for the position in Point Arena, one of my questions to the board that was interviewing me was, tell me about the community. What is like the major business, or like what? And so they kind of like, marijuana. And I have to tell you, like, that was a shock for me too, to walk on campus and it just reeked during those few months of marijuana, right? And I never like was around that growing up because my parents were pretty strict. And in college, I wasn't around that because, I was trying to make my grades. So I learned a lot about it from the students. And, I learned it was crop. And a lot of what I learned from the students was that some of the behavior was normalized. For some students, it was normal to show up in the classroom faded or high or whatever. And that was a shock for me too. Like, everyone was cool with that. And eventually I made my peace with it. And I was like, you know what? If the student is coming into my classroom, even if he's high, he must trust that he's coming to a safe place. He or she is coming to a safe place. So I'll work with that. As long as it wasn't like a violent situation, I'll teach you. You come to the classroom, I'll teach you, or you'll teach me. And a lot of that was students teaching me, like they were using these substances to escape from some reality. And people don't realize that there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of wanting to escape from the reality.
There is a lot of trauma in that small little town. It's crazy. And looking back on it, there was a lot of people that would just come wasted to school, like literally school, like drunk, and I think that's a huge thing that needs to be talked about as well, is like in Point Arena, is like the alcoholism, and like, because it's not thought to be alcoholism, it's just thought to be like, oh, you just drink a lot, you just party a lot,
right,
or whatever, and that's something that's passed down to generations, because like, for me, I saw the older guys doing it, so it's like, oh, okay, that's fine, I'll do that too, that means I should do that as well, because they look cool doing it. And that's the thing, is like, it's a cool thing in Point Arena if you party. So it's like, I think that needs to be talked about in Point Arena as well.
Yeah. With
go ahead, sorry.
With the alcoholism that's passed down from generation to generation, and the drug use, like you said, it becomes normal. So when you're doing it, it's like, everyone else is doing it, and it's an outsider that comes in and says, this isn't normal. And like you were talking about that too, like some things that now that you're away from Point Arena, you realize like, wow, that kind of wasn't normal. And I have to tell you, like, some of the students that I worked with, students of color, brilliant, you know, they had so much potential. But I saw them, especially when I got my first freshman coming in. I saw the progression. Like by the time they were seniors, the cognitive, like the ability for them to even do math problems significantly slowed down. And it was just heartbreaking for me because I wanted to save everyone. I wanted to like ensure that they had, you know, a better life than what they were kind of going towards. But, you know.
Yeah, that's very true. There is a lot of really bright people there, but it's like I feel like the gloominess of like the city of it's like constantly foggy and constantly just like kind of droopy and stuff there. So it's like I don't know, something about it, and nobody talks about it. Is like people are probably depressed there, you know,
Absolutely.
constantly.
Absolutely. There were students that I know were depressed and they were labeled as lazy, unmotivated. But unless you've had depression or know of depression to see the signs, it's very easy to blow off. But like we had a student, and I'm very cognizant of not speaking names and not making it so specific that, people will figure out who it is. But
Absolutely.
we had a student that had erratic behavior. And so like the first thought was the student must be on some kind of narcotic, right? And so my question was, what if it's a mental health issue? And it ended up being a mental health issue. And I have to believe, Juan, that there's a lot of mental health issues that are going undiagnosed. And then you do have the substance abuse that they're using to self-medicate or whatever. So it just kind of makes things worse. And then you have the younger generation growing up thinking that that's normal. So it's really awesome that you and other Point Arena graduates are, out there and showing everyone else that you can, make it out.
Yeah, I think it's very critical for us to like open up and start, like you say, just like open up to the ones coming up and it's just to speak up, because I know a lot of people like, yeah, yes, mental health. Someone is in here saying, and yeah, it's. I talked with Norma about it, and it's just completely like a just foreign language up in that area, and that's what drives people, like you said, so far into like the alcoholism. And I know for me, for sure, looking back, sophomore year, I know for sure I was depressed, but like nobody talked about it. Nobody told me anything about. Like I don't even remember learning anything about any mental health at all during my 4 years at Point Arena High School.
Right. And thankfully, there's more awareness of it now, like the social emotional learning piece. And part of it was the COVID lockdown and having to really face that. And I know we saw a comment earlier from Erica. She's one of my childhood friends. We grew up together, so she's seen the same like violence and everything else growing up, but she's now working in the mental health field. And so she's a person of color. So that's what we were talking about earlier. Like it takes us to bring our people out of, the darkness, that's where they are, because no one else will do it. And that's true for like all disenfranchised communities, including people from, small rural communities.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to touch on your son. You said in our conversation earlier, after having him, your the way you looked about teaching kind of changed, and I kind of wanted to see your like a little bit more about that situation.
Sure. So my son is 7 years old and he has severe autism. So what that looks like is he doesn't talk, he grunts, if he needs something, he does different vocalizations, he's not potty trained, he doesn't tell us when he's hungry, when he needs something, when he's wet. It's just us trying to figure it out. And so when he was born, I was already in the special education field for many years, and I had worked with all kinds of different students with disabilities or learning differences. And I had this, this master's and this teaching credential that said I'm certified to be, teaching a child like my son. But when you're a parent, it hits differently. And here I was with my special needs child, and I felt like completely alone. I felt completely unqualified. And so now I'm seeing it from the other perspective, right? As this teacher, I'm trying to tell the parent, we have all of these resources. We're going to help your child to be the best version of themselves. But as a mother, I'm like legit depressed, Juan, because I know what the outlook looks like from the teacher's side of the coin. So my teaching did change at that point because I was able to personally feel the grief that a parent goes through when their child has been diagnosed with something like severe autism. So it became even more personal. Like I've always taken my teaching personal. Like you remember I took your grades personal. Like if you weren't going to,
Yeah, absolutely.
I would be legit depressed, right? So with my son, knowing what the parent now feels like deeply, I'm very cognizant of that when I talk to parents, because I know that the grief can last forever and you can't kill people's hope. You know, you have to give them something to look forward to because small gains are still gains. And so that made me a little bit more empathetic. And I've always been very aware of how I present myself in the classroom. I know that I'm a role model, whether I want to be one or not. But now I get it from the parents' perspective so much more.
That's really awesome. And I love everything. I try to read everything that you post, and like I love I love learning from everything that you do, you know what I mean? And
you know,
yeah, you're
one of my first memories of your mom is meeting with her in the principal's office. The principal called me in to the office and I thought I was in trouble, right? Because that's the Catholic guilt. It's always my fault. I did something. And it was your mom. And she just wanted to meet with me and thank me for helping you. And she says, nobody has helped my son the way that you have. And so I was feeling happy, but also sad that you're in the 11th grade now, right? And now I only have 2 years with you. Like, that's kind of sad, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really sad. And I remember my senior year, for some reason I didn't get your class, and I was in the classroom across from you, and I was walking into class, and then you said, how come you aren't in my class? And then I just nodded my head, I don't know. And then the next day I was in your class. So yeah, I will always remember you forever for the rest of my life. When people ask me like the question, like, what's the teacher that you remember or taught you the most or was there for you? You know what I mean? It's always you for sure. And like you said, you made me feel safe. You know what I mean? In that classroom, you made me want to come to class. And I remember you would have little tasks for us to do where you would write a big word on the board, and you would say just like write how many ever name like words that you can get out of this one word. So like, you know, just doing little things like that was just like cool, because I didn't have to go like immediately write this paper or whatever I had to do that day, or immediately go to math or whatever, you know what I mean? We could kind of like wind down, you know, decompress for a little bit and then get to the work, you know what I mean? And like you said, you always made me feel safe, and not like, that's what is very key to like learning it for people like us.
Yeah, you can't learn if you don't trust the person you're learning from.
Absolutely. And then lastly, I was going to see if you had any questions for me, or if you had any topics that you wanted to bring up again that we didn't touch on in the first place.
You know, I do have some topics that I want to talk about. One, I wanted to talk about, from your perspective, now that you're, you know, an advocate, like a social advocate, what can we do to support someone like you? Like, I know that financially I can support you, but like, I feel that's not enough. What can we do in the audience to help support your cause?
Right now, all I ask is just for people to just share as much as possible. Because right now this is the only thing that I'm doing. Because I kind of stepped back from doing the homeless project and stuff like that, and the clothing and the feeding. So right now, just as much as possible, share everything. I have have a YouTube, I have the Instagram. Just right at this point, just share as much as possible and spread the word also, because I'm running into like, because at first it was a Native American based series, but now that I'm kind of running into people not wanting to do a video with me, like go live with me. So if you have anybody that would be down to join me and talk and have a conversation just like this one, that'd be super lovely.
Yeah, I know some people. I know some of them are online right now. Like,
yeah, we got a couple comments. As an employee under her leadership, she made me feel safe. And what's the social? So you can look me up. It's Juan _ 2 _ tree. So TREE. So yeah, you can just support all the efforts on there. Share as much as possible and get the word out there. That's pretty much how you can help me right now, for sure.
thank you, Juan. I'd like to invite you to speak to some of my current students. I'm not a teacher anymore. I'm an administrator that oversees an entire department of teachers that work with high school students. We had a career fair last April, and I would love for you to come and talk to our students about your experience and what you do, because college is not for everyone, and that's okay. I've been trying to push the idea that you need to find something that makes you happy and go with it, you know?
Honestly, I think we need to push like trade schools more, because like you said, college isn't for everyone, and like we need people working on things. We need plumbers, and those give really good benefits. They give, awesome things to their employees. And we have one comment that I have a 7-year-old son on the spectrum, so it is so nice to see someone bringing more attention to this topic. Thank you, April, for commenting. I really appreciate that. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on and supporting. Thank you everyone for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And like I said, you were the teacher that changed everything for me. You changed my heart. You changed my mind. You opened my eyes to see that there was a world outside of the little tiny town of Point Rena. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Juan. It was an honor for me to be here with you.
Awesome. Thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
See ya. Thank you so much for everyone for watching, commenting, liking. Like I said, if anybody wants to join, you can definitely message me on Instagram, Facebook, or wherever. Comment on YouTube, subscribe to YouTube. Yeah, thank you guys for joining. Peace, love.